I want to start with Joel Pollack. Joel is a senior editor-at-large and in-house counsel for Breitbart News. Thank you, Joel. Thank you to the entire panel. But, Joel, I'm going to start with you. Who is the real Steve Bannon? Is he an anti-Semite, a white nationalist, a misogynist, as many believe?
Well, the first thing to acknowledge is that Steve Bannon is a national hero. Because of Steve Bannon and Kellyanne, they saved Donald Trump's campaign, and they helped him win the White House. And as a result of that, we're going to see Supreme Court appointments of individuals who will uphold the Constitution. And for that, America owes Steve Bannon a great debt of gratitude. But no, he's not an anti-Semite. He is a person who treats all people equally. You can see I'm an Orthodox Jew. I'm very observant. I keep the Sabbath. I keep all the Jewish holidays. I keep kosher. Steve and I have worked together in close quarters for 4.5 years, and he's always been very sensitive to Jewish concerns. He's probably the most pro-Israel advisor ever appointed to the White House. And I have to fact-check Tom Foreman there. You know, if you're going to report something, you have to get the facts right. Breitbart News has nothing to do with birtherism, absolutely nothing. And I can tell you that firsthand because I'm the person who reported on some of that phenomenon. And you have to make sure that you tell your viewers the truth about this.
Yes, we'll discuss that with Kurt as well, who's a spokesman, in just a moment here. But you said he's not an anti-Semite. Is he a white nationalist? My question, a white nationalist, a misogynist, or even bigoted in any way that you know of?
Not at all. Steve Bannon does not have a bone of prejudice in his body. And in fact, Steve Bannon went out of his way at Breitbart to look for talent among non-traditional conservatives, just like Andrew Breitbart had championed the cause of black conservatives, Latino conservatives, women conservatives. Steve Bannon did the same thing, and he brought people on board. You know, I see Kurt there on television. He's an Asian American conservative. Here we are, an Asian American conservative, an Orthodox Jewish conservative, both of whom work for Steve Bannon. And the question is whether he's a white nationalist. I think not.
Well, then why traffic in that if he's not? Is that even more insidious if he's not, but then he traffics in it?
Can you name for me, Don, one white nationalist article at Breitbart? Just one. I saw that whole build-up segment. I didn't see a single white nationalist article. Not one.
There's the Electoral College, significant lead in the Electoral College, as you know. He lost the popular vote. But I want to ask another question about Mr. Bannon. There's been a strong...
but George, look, can I say something about that? Look, unfortunately or fortunately, this is an election that takes place in about 12 states. If Donald Trump wanted to spend 3 months in California and New York, and he would have won the popular vote. So he played the exact strategy that a smart person would play in the 12 states that mattered, and he won significantly. So I get the obsession over the popular vote, but that's really not what this election was all about.
No question he won the presidency fair and square. I was just pointing out that fact. But let me ask that question about Mr. Bannon. As you know, there's been a strong reaction. The Anti-Defamation League says he is hostile to core American values. You have the top aide to Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid saying this signals that white supremacists will be represented at the highest levels of the Trump White House. How do you respond to that?
Well, look, first of all, I don't know where they're coming from, and that's not the Steve Bannon that I know. I have sat with him for months. I have never, ever, one time experienced that. And
well, they're looking at the Breitbart website.
People are taking it way too far. What I would say, okay, look, what I would say is you have to look at the person. I think you have to get to know the person, and I think if people understood that we have a naval officer, a Harvard Business School, London School of Economics. This is a very, very smart person who's serving as a senior counsel to the president. I mean, I think there are going to be a lot of announcements of a lot of people, but I find him not to be the way that he's being accused. I find him to be the opposite, and I think people need to give people time and give people an opportunity and not make judgments. Don't judge people based on what other people say.
So you tweeted out some congratulations to Reince Priebus, which was not unusual, and you also tweeted some congratulations to Steve Bannon, which was, writing, you can see it here, congrats to both of these men, ready to work together to have the most productive first 100 days in modern history. So where are you about the only member of Congress willing to say publicly you like this guy, or even just to say publicly his name? We could barely find anybody else.
Well, I don't know that I'm the only member. I can tell you what we're focused on is that first 100 days. And when the cameras are not rolling, when the reporters are not there, I had the opportunity to be with Mr. Bannon and know the soft-spoken nature that he is, the quiet counselor that he is, and obviously the way that he held Mr. Priebus in very high regard when it was really just a private conversation. So So I think it's going to be not only a great team to put together, but we're underestimating the really President-elect Donald Trump. It will be him that makes the decisions as we set this forward. But I certainly applaud both of them, applaud the decision.
Congressman, you called Steve Bannon soft-spoken. Breitbart obviously is not. It is a provocative website and intended to be such. Does the association via Breitbart of Bannon to what many call the white nationalist movement concern you? Does that give you pause?
Well, I mean, any form of racism is denounced and certainly is not going to be supported in this administration. But to actually make Mr. Bannon truly accountable for all the headlines on Breitbart would be to hold you accountable for all the headlines on MSNBC, and neither of those would be accurate. I can tell you that having private conversations with him, he's willing to be consistent. He talked about the fact that we need to help those urban areas in western North Carolina. That didn't get him votes in North Carolina, but he was consistent, as President-elect Donald Trump was consistent, in making sure that what we do is give our government back to its rightful owner, the American people.
Congressman, it's interesting because you talk about Steve Bannon as having almost a private persona, as you've discussed, and then there's sort of the public persona that he has. Donald Trump, the president-elect, has been talked about as having one sort of persona in public, another in certain meetings and in private. Do you find that, are the American people supposed to find that reassuring that now at the top of the West Wing in these leadership positions, there are men who have perhaps a different way of speaking publicly than they do behind closed doors?
Well, I don't know that Mr. Bannon has a different way of speaking publicly than he has in private. A lot of that is the media that is saying that he is this or he is that. I can tell you that what I know is that he has consistently been one who wants to put the American people's voice as the first priority. That I applaud him for. It's a message that resonated not only in North Carolina but across the country. And so, you know, when we talk about two different personalities, really the other candidate in this race was the one that was justifying a public and a private person, and it was not Donald Trump that was doing that.
No one is saying you can't ask questions, but there's a line between asking a question and labeling someone a racist, which is what Jonathan just did. And there's a line, hold on, let me finish. There is a line between asking questions and legitimizing Donald Trump wanting to put people in internment camps, which is what you said last night, Van.
Are you saying Bannon is not part of the alt-right?
And uniting means not putting out false labels and false statements.
Are you saying
I want Van to be able to respond to that. Look, Kayleigh, we've known each other for a long time, and I've never taken your words and twisted them in any way. And I'm very, you know, we've butted our heads, but I've never done to you what you just did to me. I'd never said, and I really hope you'll apologize to me, I never said that Donald Trump is going to put people in internment camps. What I said was that there were Muslims who had contacted me who were afraid of that. I was trying to talk about the level of fear that was existing in the Muslim community. And that level of fear has frankly gone higher, not lower. So for you to take something that I was trying to share with you and our fellow panelists about the level of fear and make it seem like I'm being irresponsible, I think is horribly unfair to me,
As
Kayleigh.
political commentators, we have a duty and an obligation, Van, to correct mistruths and falsehoods, and it is a falsehood.
And I did.
No, you didn't correct that. It took me correcting you, Van.
No,
we
that's
have
not
a duty.
true,
We have an obligation.
I'm disappointed in you now.
We have an obligation to correct falsehoods. And President Barack Obama stood up there and said, "It's time to unite," and that means getting rid of these rumors and dispelling these rumors.
Bannon is a racist and an anti-Semite, and he's at
That's not true.
He's at the head of an alt-right movement that is completely anti-American, frankly, in terms of American values. You should be ashamed of yourself that you're justifying what he's about.
Bannon both for a long time. The media, I just did a long monologue how the media is corrupt and how wrong they got this. And what do they do today? They start feeding more false information. Who was Steve Bannon's best friend? Andrew Breitbart. He ran Breitbart. He was working with Andrew to launch Breitbart. Also Larry O'Connor, who I know was raised Jewish. Andrew was. So I guess an ex-wife, whatever, makes this claim. And look at what the alt-left radical media is doing yet again. They learn nothing from their mistakes in this campaign, and they're attacking Steve Bannon as something that I know that he's not. David Horowitz knows that he's not, and anybody that has...
Oh, I know he's not. I work with him very closely on the campaign. He's a brilliant strategist.
Right.
He's a very fair guy, and I'll tell you what, he had a great influence on this campaign throughout, which is why President-elect Trump is bringing him to the White House.
And by the way, his background, I was a senior partner, I guess, or executive at Goldman Sachs. I mean, he has a background. Everyone just thinks Breitbart.
Well, I haven't seen any of that in Steve in the time that I've dealt with him. I've seen a very, very smart, very bright man, very worldly man. I also think something happens to you when the election's over. And I think you've seen it happen to Donald Trump, right? Happened to me when I became mayor. The day I woke up after being elected mayor, I realized, oh my God, I got to do this now. And there's a weight that falls on your shoulders, and you start to think in a somewhat different way. And it's not that you change your positions, but you begin to realize, I've got to bring in more people. I've got to listen to more opinions. I've got to broaden my horizons. I don't think that just happens to the president. I think that happens to the chief of staff, the policy advisor, the communications director, secretary of defense, attorney general, secretary of state. There's a different, when you're out there just criticizing, it's one thing. When you actually get on the inside, there's a certain weight of responsibility for the American people that is on your shoulders. And I think Steve Bannon is the kind of guy who gets that.
Have you seen
He's
that?
a patriot. He's a patriot. He loves America. He may have a different view of America than you do, but he loves America as much as you or I do. And I think he will give Donald Trump his best advice. And ultimately, it's the president who makes the decisions.